Welcome to the Pink Hearse Podcast, a real and whimsical look at what it means to be fully alive with all the joy and chaos and pressure and vulnerability and beauty. Take the ride along with unexpected guests and be inspired to fall in love with your own unique destiny and meaning. Well, the hearse is in the shop, so we're riding the rails of infusion along the most quote-heavy route we can find. Join Zachary Murdock, Edward Crowe, and their guest P.D. Newman as the trio tunes into the true essence of being. All impractical practicalities have been disclosed. Enjoy.
Easier to forget than remember. Argue than to listen. Hate than to love. Yell than to whisper. Judge than to soften. Worship than to wonder, rush than to stroll, strike than be injured, squirm than be still, react than be conscious. For me at least, a little prayer reminder to start my day. And before I go, one last note. It's easier to be perfect than flawed. This episode is sponsored by Finger Socks and Toe Gloves. I have no idea what they do exactly, but they paid us in books, which we've eaten and are now full. Check them out, though. Their PR people were polite and good-looking. If you hear low rumbling today, it's either the garbage trucks or the thunder gods. It's trash day in my neighborhood, and it's a tropical storm, literally and metaphorically. With limited RAM space, let's begin with Ram Dass. He says, in most of our human relationships, we spend much of our time reassuring one another that our costumes of identity are on straight. So, you're Danny, I'm old so-and-so, and your name starts with an E, I think. Is that right? Who is who? What costumes are we wearing today, y'all?
All starts with an E.
Our guest today is P.D. Newman, Danny, author, father, mystic, Mason, and perhaps one of the most knowledgeable individuals I've ever met. And also, I would say you're not top-heavy with intelligence. You're deeply rooted in soul. For real, though. Blowing my mind since we met a few days ago. Thanks for the connection, Edward. So, how you doing? Welcome to the hearse. What's up, everybody?
Man, I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited for this.
I'm doing incredible, man. Doing incredible. Excited to get on this journey.
Let's go.
Where are we starting at today? Where is the hearse?
The hearse is in the shop. We're on a train. We're getting off of a train, and Rudolf Steiner is with us. And outside, there's a puddle. And apparently, we're time traveling because this is a true story about Rudolf Steiner. I went to Waldorf schools. Danny, you brought up Steiner recently. Apparently, Rudolf Steiner was getting off the train. There was a puddle. He had a lot of fans waiting for him. He looked at who he was with, whoever his homie was riding. Probably you, Edward, because we're on the train. And he said, you know, the problem is, if I step over the puddle or if I step in the puddle, they're going to think that's the way you're supposed to step with puddles. So, puddle wisdom right there. So, there's no way we're going to begin to cover all of the elements in my brain that have been bursting, specifically inspired by a communication with Danny, with you, the past few days since Edward connected us. We've been exchanging a lot of texts and books and thoughts and beats and songs, and my brain has been just firing, plus starting my master's program. So there's, again, no way we're going to cover all of the things that I've been thinking about. Before we began, I reached into the magic envelope of quotes from my sister Ruth, and the quote that came out is fitting for what I just mentioned. It's from William Blake. To see a world in a grain of sand, and heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. So, I'm going to do my best, as I told Molly, which I'm probably going to fail at, to listen to Danny, you specifically, because again, I'm blown away by you. So I'm going to try to keep things limited. But in the vein of feeling like there's too much to talk about, where to begin. Seeing the owl on the wire last night as we were walking, as I mentioned to you before this recording. I was reading Rock, A Bedtime Story last night. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Arnold LaBelle, who wrote Frog and Toad, but this is called Owl at Home. And I just wanted to put on my father cap, read us a little bedtime story, and then just go from there. Owl's house had an upstairs and a downstairs. There were 20 steps on the stairway. Some of the time, Owl was upstairs in his bedroom. At other times, Owl was downstairs in his living room. When Owl was downstairs, he said, "I wonder how my upstairs is." When Owl was upstairs, he said, "I wonder how my downstairs is getting along. I'm always missing one place or the other. There must be a way," said Owl, "to be upstairs and to be downstairs at the same time. Perhaps if I run very, very fast, I can be in both places at once." Owl ran up the stairs. "I am up," he said. Owl ran down the stairs. "I am down," he said. Owl ran up and down the stairs faster and faster. "Owl," he cried, "are you downstairs?" There was no answer. "No," said Owl, "I am not downstairs because I am upstairs. I'm not running fast enough." "Owl," he shouted, "are you upstairs?" There was no answer. "No," said Owl, "I am not upstairs because I am downstairs. I must run even faster." "Faster, faster, faster," cried Owl. Owl ran upstairs and downstairs all evening, but he could not be in both places at once. "When I am up," said Owl, "I am not down. When I am down, I am not up. All I am is very tired." Owl sat down to rest. He sat on the 10th step because it was a place that was right in the middle. To me, that kind of sums everything up that I've been reading and all the mystics and theologians. And so anyway, Danny, what's going on, man? What does all this madness make you think of, and where are you at?
So you reading that just made me realize what was going on with. You ever heard of the band Can?
No.
Oh, man. You want to know about Can?
Okay.
They were a German group, and when they started in the 60s, they were decades ahead. They were touching into punk and post-punk, and incredible band. But they had this African-American vocalist named Malcolm Mooney. And on their first record, which is called Delay because its release was delayed till 1970 something, but it was recorded in 67, 68. But the last track on there is called Froggy and Toady, and he's telling the story about Frog and Toad. But what's odd is he ended up in a mental institution because he lost his mind on stage. But when he lost his mind, he screamed over and over hundreds of times, "Upstairs, downstairs, upstairs, downstairs."
Wow, that's great.
I just got goosebumps.
I have to wonder, if he was locked in that book somehow.
Wow. Are you guys my psych nurses? No jokes about that. I've been there, and sending him love on his journey, wherever he may be, Mr. Mooney. That's powerful. And I think it's fitting to begin with that because I'm obviously coming in here joking and teasing, but it is no small matter to navigate consciousness the way that you and I have been discussing, and Edward, you and I discuss. And so just taking a moment in the spirit of that story to, feel the gravity of it all as well.
Great story.
It almost reminds me, just to chime in on that, it almost reminds me of, like, early to go into this, but psychedelic journeys. Like, you're familiar with people getting stuck in a loop. Like when you said he went crazy and was saying upstairs, downstairs, upstairs, downstairs. I've heard people, saying, like, you know what I'm talking about probably, Danny, right? Like when someone's stuck in a loop and they can't get out of that loop, and they tend to do things like that. And I think that's definitely a level of insanity.
Yeah.
And you could call the 10th step. I just thought some of my favorite philosophers, like this man, Arnold LaBelle, or A.A. Milne, or J.R.R. Tolkien, many are writing in children's book form. It's like the most, because that whole analogy is just super powerful. And sitting on the 10th step in the middle, I mean, it's very Taoist and mystic.
And it sneaks it right past that door. If it's framed as a children's story, we have zero resistance to it.
Exactly.
Like Dr. Seuss, like Horton Hears a Who's a great example.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My son loves that one.
Yeah, it's amazing. All the imagination heroes and fairy tales, and none of that watered down modern Disney stuff either. The real kind of paradoxical, strange things. But shout out to Fantasia. Anyway, so last night, almost like a mini culmination of our journey thus far of exchanging mystic books, you sent me an article by Peter Kingsley, who I was not familiar with. And if you think it's appropriate, I'll put it in the show notes for you guys listening. 2 pages, incredibly powerful. Sent it to some of my close friends this morning, including my dad. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the idea of our longing longs for us, as Peter Kingsley describes, and this kind of ancient ache for something that has been with us ancestrally as far back as you can trace written word or historical information. And your take on all that, because it did feel like a sobering culmination to our conversation of like, okay, we're going back and forth with these ideas, and then here it is though in this plain, like here it is, like at the center of it all. The longing longs for us. Any information that we get from outside is never going to satiate, because we're looking for something that's only in each of us individually. Can you just speak a bit to your longing, the longing for longing?
Yeah. Well, since we touched on insanity a little bit, I'll approach this from a psychological angle. There's a great Freudian psychoanalyst, Jacques Lacan is his name. But he talks about the concept of monk, it means lack, and essentially, ultimately, it means lack of the breast, right? Because when we're infants, he also has this idea of the imaginary, the symbolic, and the real. The imaginary is the imaginary place the infant exists when he doesn't know he's separate from his mother. He spent 9 months in her womb. He has no way of distinguishing that this is not me. So after birth, of course, she's still present. And he recognizes that by the satisfaction and the nourishment that she gives him, right? But when the breast is gone, which means when hunger sets in, that's the first identifying feature of an infant outside of the imaginary identification with the mother. Once that lack happens, it's absolute, right? Because it's the first mark. It's like striking a mark on a flat piece of lead or something. Even if we fill that mark, the mark is still absolute. It's so the first thing that we come to identify with is lack, which I think is wrapped up with this concept of longing, because as we grow, we'll begin to try to fill that same hole with other things. It could be booze, it could be shopping, it could be women, it could be traveling, anything to fill that void that can't be filled, right? But to take it to a metaphysical level, a theological level, this great mystic Dionysius the Areopagite, he talks about apophatic mysticism, which is negative mysticism, meaning anything that we can say about God or the gods or whatever you imagine the fully transcendent numinous to be is wrong, because it limits it to that. We're talking about something infinite and limitless, but has no quantity, has no quality that we can put on it. So the best we can imagine it as void, right? So we spend our lives trying to fill our void with things that are surrogates for the sense of oneness we experienced with our creator, our mother, in the physical sense. But when that longing calls back to us, I think it's that sense of the void calling to us. And the Buddhists get this, that the self is void, that there is nothing here that is substantial. Heraclitus, everything changes. You can't walk through the same river twice because you're not the same man. It's not the same river, right?
Oh.
So the ultimately, once we begin deconstructing ourselves, I'm not my desires. I'm not the things I buy and identify with. As much as I love them, I'm not my family. I'm not my friends. Where do we stop? I'm not my body. I can remove pieces. I'm still here. I'm not my senses. We finally end up facing that same void, which is both our sense of lack and our ultimate salvation from that sense of lack. That's what I get from that.
Upstairs, downstairs, upstairs, downstairs.
I love that I'm not the same man and this is not the same river. That's it.
Yeah.
What's crazy is that was my assignment last week from my Pacifica is practicing bibliomancy with Heraclitus.
Oh man, Heraclitus is great. A lot of current philosophers like to pit him against Parmenides, because Parmenides, his idea is that there is no change, that all of this is one thing. If it's one thing, how can there be change at all? So they'll say that he and Heraclitus are in disagreement. I don't think so. I think they're pointing at the same problem through a different route, through a different means. We might even say Heraclitus is dealing with the microcosm, Parmenides is dealing with the macrocosm, right?
That's amazing. Yeah.
But they're still tapping into the same problem with perception.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great assignment. It sounds like you have a good professor.
Amazing professor. Too. Yeah. And tomorrow night I'm going to a salon at this campus. I mean, you should teach / we should all be students there / what is our life? How lucky are we? So I'm reading Hillman. We talked a bit about him, and I ordered the book, The Underground. What was it? The Dream in the Underworld?
Dreams in the Underworld, yeah.
So the book that I'm reading, he talks about this idea of the heart as being the original sensory organ and the heart as what initially was thought of as the thinking part of yourself. So if that's the case, and he goes on to say that the word cosmos was kind of hijacked by imperialistic, whatever, same ways you were explaining with the mysticism of original Christian mystics versus contemporary Christianity, etc., that the word cosmos never meant a vague word to describe the universe, but actually meant about the proper order and placement of things within the world as we know it. And so he's talking about beauty and how beauty even is a word that does a disservice to beauty itself, like it's too vague of a word, and that the heart is meant to see the thing, whether it's the flower, the tree, the you, etc., and then in the recognition of its true, I don't fully understand the whole thing, and it doesn't really matter, but in the recognition of like James Joyce's distinguishing between pornographic art and true art, like the flower strikes you in such a way where you're like, whoa, kind of like Fernando Pessoa talking about his sensing. It reminds me a lot of that. So then the heart, what it does is it imagines, and imagining is part of its way of sensing and our true way of sensing. But over time, there became this body image split. And I'm sure you're familiar with the idea of the image or the symbol, and the image is autonomous and the image is connected to the essence of the thing. They're almost inseparable. It's not even like the image is a representation. It is the thing.
The icon.
So Hillman, in his humorous, funny, shit-talking trickster way, animist way, talks about basically that there's a body. We're now in a time that's so fractaled that we're living with bodies that have no image and images that have no bodies. And I thought that was really interesting, and it made me think of, again, the Fernando Pessoa quote about thinking is to have eyes that aren't well. And my friend Howard, 81-year-old Howard at the gym, who I just ran into, saying we're entering the fifth dimension, or some of us are, where in that dimension, as you see it, so it is. That reminds me of all of this. So I was just curious, your take on this connection to the heart perception, imagination, what it means to Fernando to say that thinking is to have eyes that aren't well. What is that to orient to this whole like conversation and life in general, and someone like yourself who's read so many books? Yeah, what does that all make you think of? The heart as the true brain, thinking it means you're sick. What does it mean to not think, etc.?
It makes me think of Hillman's statement. He likes to say, "Stick with the image," right? Because he says you dream of a black snake, and if you go to a Freudian or a Jungian, they're going to say, okay, what is this snake? What does it represent? And he says, the moment we do that, we've killed the snake. When what the soul wants is for you to be present with the black snake, right? The moment we think about it, because all we can do is analyze in this meta-modern world. We separate it into pieces when we should really be synthesizing and maybe saying, how am I the black snake? Or synthesizing the two. And I also found it fascinating that he's talking about the heart in relation to beauty and the cosmos. The word cosmos, it's a Greek word that means to adorn something, like a woman with jewelry.
That's what he said, that cosmetics is actually closer to the true meaning than cosmos, how it's used now. Yeah.
Decorated and the beauty of it. And in philosophy, particularly in late antiquity, beauty, Socrates talks about this, Proclus talks about this, but they call beauty a mean, a ratio between two things. So where does the rose end? Where I see it or where I smell it, right? And that smell, the word for beauty and the word for to call to something in Greek are almost identical. So they're saying that beauty itself is a call. It's calling you to it. And people today, they like to say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But for people in late antiquity, that's bullshit. You might think it's interesting or strange or odd. That's not the same thing as beauty, true beauty, which is a flawlessly symmetrical gorgeosity, that should, in theory, draw our minds beyond its physical appearance and into the source of why is it beautiful? What is it that makes it beautiful? And we can be attracted to a beautiful woman that can act beautifully, that has a beautiful soul about her. But what is it that makes it beautiful, right?
Two things. One, the idea that beauty is terrifying in a certain way. Like it is the root of the most fear in the world because of what you're talking about. It's like that true longing, or it can shatter what you thought and your little ideas of control and identity when you come in contact with beauty. It does that. So that's one thing I've been learning in school, and you're making me think of, and in the Longing piece by Kingsley, just how afraid we are of the longing, because it will, shatter potentially everything we thought we were or what we wanted or the lives that we thought. Like beauty does not have any, is not going to pussyfoot around the truth of the matter.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
But then connecting that to something you've said to me a few times, which really strikes me, is as fathers, we need to say yes to the miracle. So those two things, the beauty being this terrifying, ancient, timeless call, perhaps like Plato and Ion, the magnetic call to truth in ourselves, or some sort of reorientation of beauty as truth, and then being dads and saying yes to the miracle. Can you speak to something in there?
Yeah, I believe that. And I think anytime we turn from the longing and turn to something we mistake or make a surrogate for that lack, that's saying no to the miracle. We're trying to say, I'd rather it be this way, as though we were more intelligent than the universe, more intelligent than the gods, when really we should be saying, thank you. Anything you show me. You could be in the most terrible situation of your life, unbearable. But if something were to step out and give you a choice and say, you can end it now, or would you rather exist and be in this? I think 99% of us, at least healthy people, are going to say, no, I would prefer this suffering to the alternative. And the alternative, we don't know what it is. We have different traditions and religions telling us what it's going to be like after we die. But in the final analysis, beyond some near-death experiences, some intuitions, and some really creative writing, we don't know, but what we do know is, like you just said, what we see. To see it, to believe it, and the minute we say no to that, no, I think I would rather have this instead. That's the worst message we can send our children, I think, is that we're smarter than the universe. We're smarter than the gods.
Wow.
Right, like that divine plan might be something that seems tragic to us in this moment, but it's what needs to happen to segue into something that's meant to be.
That's exactly it, Edward. There's a great saying among Vietnamese thinkers. They say, God writes in straight lines using crooked letters. Right?
Yeah, damn.
Man, so in certain indigenous traditions, you're not allowed to pray for someone unless they ask you to. That's one thing you're reminding me of. Like, whatever is happening, be wary of the part that thinks it shouldn't be happening, because exactly what Edward just said. The other thing it's making me think of is the Dalai Lama laughing out loud during an interview when asked if he had any regrets, because apparently there was no word for regret in his language. And he had to have that be explained to him so many times, and he kept bursting out laughing because everything is exactly as it should be in every moment. And then the other thing it makes me think of is our talk yesterday about our seemingly shared perspective around the misuse of the word manifestation in modern. That's my language, so I'm not putting you in that, saying that's your perspective. But for me, based off what you just said, those who the gods wish to punish, they answer their prayers. Or what I said on the Normandy episode, which she asked me to stop and repeat, Oscar Wilde saying, I say to my soul, be still and wait without hope, for hope would be hope for the wrong thing. So, there's basically, let me see. Let me go back to my little weird map in the glove box, even though we're on a train. Yet concerning the arcana of language, I shall only reveal what the infamy and madness of this time allow me to reveal. So that's from something you sent, Christopher Bamford, translating Canticle of Knowledge by Oscar Vladislas de Lubix Milaz. Probably butchered. Okay. Spiritual mentor of, I believe, one of them is your favorite poet. And there's a bunch of trippy cats in there talking about stuff. So he talks in that beautiful sequence of pages. What stuck out including what I just said, do you feel the most ancient of your memories awakening in you? Can you just speak to that, Cat, man? Like a little bit of what, some essence nuggets from those 8 pages or so that you sent?
Well, he's a all but forgotten poet, mystic, alchemist. He's most well remembered as the mentor for R.A. Schwaller de Lubitsch, or Lubitsch, and that's where he got that. Lubitsch comes from Oscar Władysław de Lubitsch Milow's. That's his crest name. So, in giving Schwaller his crest name, he's taking him as his son. He's his spiritual father. Now, Lubitsch went on to be one of the most famous Egyptologists to ever live. He studied at Luxor for 13 years, I think. Excuse me. And the concept he gave to the world after studying the temples was that the dimensions and the ratios of the temples mirror the human body. So he contributed this idea, which is already familiar, and the body is the temple and various scriptures. But he showed how temples in Egypt were bodies. They were built as bodies that you're entering. And Milow's, like I said, was his teacher. And Milow's had this mystical experience. And he's a Christian. And I find this really fascinating because clearly he has superior vision when it comes to spiritual insight and his eloquence in terms of speaking things that are ineffable, that I wouldn't be able, if you asked me, I wouldn't be able to say it. And he had this awakening on Christmas morning or on Epiphany. It was some big Christian holiday. But he entered this space where there was no space. There was no time. He saw that air doesn't exist, and very Parmenidean, that I'm looking at my bookshelf, but between us, and even scientifically, this is true. Air isn't vacuum. It's full of molecules. It's full of particles, subatomic particles, the same stuff we're made of. So he had this vision of the world as this soup. But what allowed that vision was this golden solar egg that he saw above his head, and I believe it entered his body and changed his vision forever. And his poetry, from prior to that to after that, it's like reading, somebody studying poetry in a creative writing class versus a prophet.
It's like Robert Johnson at the crossroads.
Yeah, literally overnight. So that's who he is. And what I love about that poem I sent you is when he talks about, to understand what he's trying to say to you in that poem, you need to understand the essences of certain words. And he gives words like bread, salt, blood,
fire.
And it's just...
And metals. That, in the way he said it, was something like, these are not the siblings or something of other words. These are the fathers. And like,
right. They're not
that
the
was
brothers,
crazy.
Brothers of the things they describe. They're objects that they're attached to. They're the fathers of them.
Crazy.
And it's the very Pythagorean, Proclean kind of idea that names aren't accidents, that names, according to Proclus, they come from soul, and that they are statues that pre-exist the things they describe. So the name of anything, we've entered this magical world where to say it is enough. It is to be it and participate in it. And he gets it. It's clear Milow's gets that.
So that's logos, maybe, sort of?
Logos, logos can mean the underlying intelligence that informs everything.
Hold on, Juju's is trying to escape. This conversation's too heady for Juju. 1 second. Let me let him out.
I'm interested to hear your definition of logos. I heard you talking about it yesterday. I read a little bit, but I want to hear more about that for sure.
It's a loaded term for sure. It emerges out of the Platonic tradition, and in Platonism, there's this idea of the hypostases, which the closest coordinate might be the Holy Trinity. There's the monad, or the one, which is the highest God beyond being. Below that is nous. Nous means mind. And that we might equate with the Son. So we've got the Father, the Son, and then below that is Suke, or soul, the world soul, the anima mundi, which we might equate with the Holy Spirit. And logos is the dynamic aspect of nous, of mind. So when Christ is called the logos, he's the word that was made flesh. It's saying that he's the entire mind of God incarnate in a person, much like Buddha, and Buddha talked about all is mind, right? Same kind of idea. But in Greek thought, post-Plato, everything that exists in the world is a dim reflection and descends from the forms, the ideas. And these forms exist in the nous, in the mind of God. And so you descend from one of these forms. I descend from one of these forms. We both might descend from the same form. As in Vonnegut terms, we might be in the same karass, But what they're saying about Christ is that he's not a form. All the forms exist in his mind, and he's incarnated. But they get this idea from Platonism and Neoplatonism. Logos being for them the dynamic, active aspect of nous, which is the source of all being, because the monad beyond that is above being. It's beyond being.
And yesterday we're talking about that because I had asked you a big important question for me in my life has been, how do I have skeleton keys for some of these incredible texts, including Young, including Campbell, including all these predecessors and way OGs, a lot of whom were writing through the tools they had at the time, which often were male Christian-centric terminology, which has always made me feel uncomfortable and annoyed since a kid. But also I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So how do you read between those lines? And you helped me immensely, and you're already explaining to us why you've helped me to kind of go back to the essence of things and reanimate. B, I jokingly said the idea that Molly had talked about with Hillman, like maybe beyond oneness, there is something else, because people always just say, oh, it's all one. And if Molly studied in India, with the Nidras and all that kind of stuff, like Yogananda, all these amazing people who are into the breathing and the oneness and the yada yada, not to summarize them per se, but then she said, if that's the breathing and the oneness, then death psychology is like coffee and cigarettes, you know what I mean? And you're like, yeah, and well, fucking, it's complex, motherfucker. Like, let's get real about this shit. So beyond the oneness monad, I asked you about that, and you said it the best thing. You said something like, if the monad is the phallic, like whatever, then the thing beyond is like the nothing vulva. And then we were talking about the grandmother of God. And anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Like, there's also just so much beyond the beyond.
The Kabbalists get that. If you look at the Etz Chaim, what they call the tree of life, it's a series of 10 spheres they're called Sephiroth, but at the top is a Sephirah called Kether or Keter, which means the crown, and it signifies the one. But beyond that is something called, in modern Kabbalistic circles, the 000. And the 000, so there are these layers beyond the one. There's Ein, which means nothingness. There's Ein Sof, which means infinity. And there's Ein Sof Or, which means infinite light. infinite fullness, right? It only takes a snap of the finger to go from total emptiness to total fullness. It's how you perceive it, right?
Interesting.
Empty versus full. It's if we put light in the equation, automatically the brain can grasp it. We need something to hold on to it, and that goes back to that apophatic, that negative theology. We can't grasp the negative, but there's its opposite is cataphatic mysticism. Cataphatic means to bring it down into something we can look at, like a statue, a lover, right? But if we have something like light to latch onto, all of a sudden we can grasp fullness and emptiness in one picture, but without something to grab. And I think that goes back to what you said earlier, Zach, about imagination, and thought being in the heart. There's a great Russian mystic, Valentin Tomberg, who talked about, we like to put the head at the center, but he said that the heart is the sun. That's the warmth. That's the redness. But he said gray matter, that's the silver moon. If we put the moon at the center, everything is thrown off. The brain has to orbit the heart. And when we talk about the heart, especially in late antiquity, it's wrapped up with imagination, just like you said from Hillman. And Hillman is steeped in this stuff, so he knows this already. But we have this, what's called a okima in Neoplatonism. In Kabbalah, they call it, in Judaism, they call it Merkaba. They both mean chariot, but it's this soul vehicle. And in this vehicle, we can travel through the cosmos. We can ascend. But once you start thinking in those terms, naturally somebody's going to ask you, well, what do you mean? Because you're not going anywhere. You're still sitting here right in front of me. And this is rectified by something that is way ahead of its time. They're saying this in the second, third, fourth century, that this chariot is like a magic theater. It's like a magic eye. And what changes isn't your station, but the quality and caliber of imagery that's reflected on the screen. What you can imagine is what changes. And I love that. They've got no television, and yet they can think in those terms. It's like we can only do what we're already doing. When we make television, when we make windows and we have icons, we can only do, we make ourselves over and over and over.
So the same Oscar, The Canticle of Knowledge by Oscar, let's just call him Oscar. I don't know if he was grouchy, but it's trash day. So another quote from him, he says, first climb up sacrilegiously to the craziest affirmations. Then descend, rung by rung, regretless, tearless, with a joyous confidence, a regal patience, to that mud which already contains everything with such terrible obviousness, and by a necessity so holy, by a necessity so holy, holy, truly holy, alleluia. And then he goes on to say, only we, who are his little children, know this sacred game, this holy dance, this happy floating between worst darkness and best light.
Makes me think of your father's statement about being a black magician before being a white magician. You have to burn yourself before you realize I'm not using this the right way.
So Edward, to put that in context, my dad listened to our last episode, an animated exploration of the ineffable. After you had done the journey, and it touched him deeply, and he said it also made him think about the old idea, which could have been a Crowley inspired thing, but whatever, the idea that in order to become a white magician, you first have to be a black magician, which is basically
you saying that.
Yeah, which is basically for me, kind of the Holy Grail. It's the same as Parsifal. Like, who does the Grail serve? in his infantile young man state, he sees how the Grail is so tailored to his inner excitement. He's like, oh, it must be me. But then he's cast out. And then later, if he's lucky enough to return as an old injured soldier, now he knows it serves the Grail King or the Grail whatever. So on that note of my dad, thy will be done. So yesterday I wrote a song to one of your beats, and it was intense. Your beats have been inspiring this trickster kind of funny character in me. And I was talking to my dad kind of about that commitment to the unconscious, if you will, or what I'm learning in school. They would say what it requires to not just settle for societal father. I'm very into this new idea too, and I know I'm saying a lot, but the societal father is what most people accept through education. They relinquish their personal whatever, longing, and they accept these hollowed out symbols that are not theirs, which are disappointing, which is why in the Longing article he says no matter what job, woman, thing, you're always going to feel this ache. But they accept that. They put down their sword, so to speak. And it makes sense that they would do that. But needing to develop as someone who often would be maybe considered shaman, creator, whatever, those of us who can't do that for whatever reason, we are ostracized, sort of. We have trouble connecting. We could be called narcissists. We could be called aloof, but those are all our attempts to protect ourselves. And the fine line between neuroses versus artists, and that's where I love when Jung and Hillman are battle rapping Freud backwards through time. It's fucking hilarious. So basically, coming to this idea that it requires the black magician turning white magician is those of us who are not accepting the societal father, therefore we kill that father in service of perhaps the real Holy Father who's connected to the dark grandmother as well. But we need something to lean on so we don't get lost in the primordial soup and go crazy on stage saying upstairs, downstairs. What do we lean on if we can't lean on the societal world? We can't lean on religion as it is now. We have to lean on the self. The self is you plus other. I say all that to say this idea of needing a highly intelligent mind combined with a charged unconscious is the key, according to, I believe, Eric Newman. That struck me. He said, in order to create living symbols, you need to have both. Otherwise, it's kind of like gibberish soup. So I'm talking to my dad, and I say a bit of the verse, and I'm asking him, man, I feel like I'm watching this unconscious entity coming through me sometimes with the music. And then my conscious side or whatever is like, is that okay? Like, oh God, was that too much? Am I inflammatory? He brings up thy will be done. And how most people think of that in his estimation as an external will, as if God or the world was outside. Thy will be done. But what if it actually means the you inside you and what that looks like? So not doing things for the outer world at all. We are the universe talking to itself. Take back your power. So I just talked a lot of shit. I know you caught what I was putting down. My question to you is your experience with that of honoring your unconscious, if we want to use words to name that thing, using your highly developed mind and tool, and then knowing that you're not ever going to probably be understood, really. I mean, it's cool when we meet and stuff because it's like, oh shit, it's lonely out here. I kind of catch what, I feel like we relate more intimately than others. But I've fallen into that trap again and again of feeling giving away my power in my commitment to my unconscious, and then I still feel hungover and sad when it doesn't come back a certain way. And just your experience of thy will be done, plus taking your power back, plus just being the big O, as Shel Silverstein wrote, of fully becoming the alchemical wedding of you and what that means. Too many words, man. Kevin, edit that shit. What's up?
You gotta say please.
All right, let me see if I can remember everything I want to say. And as far as being misunderstood and that isolating us, Huxley has this great line where he says that we're all island universes and we never really communicate except at second hand. And there's some truth to that. Communication, it's not to say it doesn't happen, but it's rare. We operate under the illusion that we've communicated, and that gets us along fairly well. But it's still an illusion. If I say something about a muscle car, I'm not into cars, but somebody that is into cars is going to hear something completely different than what I mean, right? But we walk away like we've communicated and communed with one another somehow. So I think that's a problem that we're always going to have. But your dad, whether he's aware of it or not, his thought reminds me so much of Aleister Crowley's thought. And you related it to the unconscious, to, personality number one versus personality number two.
Which is a simplification, and in Steppenwolf, he says it's way more complex than that. But continue, please.
Yes, but the spirit of the times versus the spirit of the depths.
Yeah.
And Crowley talks about this. He represents the will, one's true will, as the phallus and a dwarf. It's this phallic dwarf figure. But we come into this world as an impulse of being, of the universe, with a specific purpose. But it's hidden to us because we're so blind and distracted by this lack problem, this longing problem. But if we can discover our purpose and only do that, it's, he says, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. That sounds like an invitation to do whatever the fuck you want, when it's right the opposite. It's find out what your will is, but then you get to do nothing else. But if you can do that, your life becomes, instead of trying to fight against a tidal wave that's taking you somewhere you think you don't want to be, you get to surf. You have the whole force of creation at your back, because you become a force of creation by saying yes to whatever the riddle is that emerged as you. So the idea of thy will be done, if we're going to look at it as the unconscious, very Crowleyan. That's the only will that we should be doing.
Which is like the longing as well, in my estimation of what Kingsley is talking about.
Yeah, they're inseparable, and they seem opposite because we think of will as one-pointedness, and longing is the opposite, right? It's a falling backwards. But really, we're talking about the same thing. We're back at Heraclitus and Parmenides, but we're dealing with the same problem. The equations have changed, but the sum, the product is identical. And when I think of thy will be done, the way I interpret it is inseparable from what you said and what your father said about black magic versus white magic. Black magic is easy. We do it every day. We do it every time we make a business deal, every time we think of something and get up and do it. People think magic is like psychokinesis, like I can make something come to me. Guess what? We have bodies. We can get up and walk over there and make it come to us. That's no less magical. We've accomplished magic, right? But that's black magic. That doesn't mean it's bad magic. The division into colors is misleading, because we're not saying black is bad. We're just saying it's not white magic. And white magic is always uniting with God, with your daemon, with something, samadhi, theosis, or henosis. These notions of not uniting where there are two things. Oh, here's me, here's God. You become God firsthand. You see the world as the thing beyond being that created it. That's white magic. Anything other than that is black magic.
So would you say, my bad, Danny, go ahead.
I was just saying, what do you think would be harder, black magic or white magic? And
To me, white magic. It seems, what I was going to ask was, it seems like black magic, based on what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is more of like I mean, it could be conscious as well, but is it not what people do unconsciously all day long, like you mentioned? And then white magic seems to be more intentional, and you have to work to understand and project that.
Well, wait. Also on that too, I said I said white magic would be harder, but then I thought, no, maybe black magic's harder because it's fighting the tidal wave as opposed to surfing. I don't know.
That's a great point.
I think black magic is easier now, but once you reach that other level and you've broken through the kind of miseducation and you re-educate to alignment of something which is like you and it, like wandering into the desert, so you're not tethered to, you know, wife, father, son, mother, society thing, and you really are in tune, which then to me is not an argumentative state either. Like, you're not defensive. I've been there in myself, and I can feel it around people who are just radiating good energy from this place of aha. And so I think once you're there, then white magic is like breathing, once you've kind of detoxed. But for now, white magic is very difficult because we're so steeped in like Michael Meade talks about the secondary contracts that we make after we come in with that first contract, and then we start making all these other contracts because we've been separated from the breast and we need to learn how to eat, and our mom gets mad when we don't do that, and we do this, yada yada yada. But the first contract is the only one that you're actually obligated to, and that first contract's going to keep knocking on your door to the point of killing you if you don't listen. But yes, I think undoing the second contracts, which keep piling up, is so hard.
Mm-hmm. And that's why people retreat to monasteries. You know, they cut ties with everything and say, okay, let me just get back to the one thing. Why am I here? Whom does the Grail serve, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Edward, I'm right there with you in that. Please speak to it. I didn't mean to jump in like a.
No. You're good. You're good. I was just curious. Am I on track with that idea? You know what I mean? The black magic, of course, it can be done intentionally, but is that kind of what happens? You know, when people are moving and doing their thing as a human. You know what I mean? The black magic, right? And then you have to kind of work to understand, project, and utilize the white magic, right?
Right. I think that's a good understanding and a good assessment. We have to change the way we think about magic, because this isn't a material world we live in. We live in a world of mind. Every act is an act of magic. So it really becomes the Taoist kind of mystery, if you've read the Tao Te Ching, where the masters accomplish everything by doing nothing. We stop doing because we stop thinking we have the solution. We can't, as us, qua man, we can't have the solution. But as gods, we can. By identifying with our ultimate source, we can solve anything. Just because we live in this world of the illusion of separation, it's important to always back up and say, correct yourself, I can't do anything, but the gods can do anything with me.
Right.
Even though it amounts to the same thing, but the brain hears it, and all of a sudden it gets on a high horse, and you go into that trance and start acting that way, and all you do is accrue more debt, more contracts, right?
Right.
It makes me think of a couple things. One, that kind of a kahuna idea, I believe my dad's friend, a Hawaiian shaman, said, just because they're dead doesn't mean they're smart. So that idea of the ancestors and the dead can also be trapped, and also that gods can also be trapped. And so like people, because I think of like in the relinquishing the reins or Rumi's guest house, it's such a fine line because you see people, and I've experienced it in my way, that there are possessions. So what's the difference between thy will be done and possession? And, all of those kind of things come up.
Nothing.
Yeah. No, I know exactly, but you can feel the difference between like frantic desperation possession and like I've come across entities that are really mad and want to like get revenge for all of the horrible things that white men mostly have, but it's way deeper than that and it goes far beyond white men. So
I would call that obsession.
But I've felt spirits like that feel beyond human power, but they're really angry, which makes me think they're still trapped at a certain level of the game, as opposed to a spirit that kind of may have agenda in the game, but is holding it a little more lightly and buzzes with a little bit more of the laughter of the immortal grin, as opposed to being so identified with the energy that it's wielding, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm going to respond to that, but I don't want you to take it as a personal judgment or jab at you.
Please.
But one thing Proclus says that I really like. He says the gods, they have no appearance. They have no bodies. So you can't think of it that way. And yet the gods appear to people, but when they describe them, every description is different. He says what we bring to the table, what he calls our epitidieties, our preparation, determines how we see the god. And I'm talking about gods. Now, there are other spirits out there. That doesn't make them good. Spirits can lie. They can be vengeful. People lie and can be vengeful. Why not spirits? Anything.
What's a spirit, if you don't mind me asking to you, in distinction from God energy, spirit energy? How would you quantify spirits?
We think about the hierarchy of being. We've got like I said, the hypostases earlier. We've got the monad at the top. Below that, we have the forms. Below that, we have the gods. Beneath each god is a daemon. And Plato, Diotima, she says that a daemon is any being that exists between man and the gods. And they carry man's aspirations to the gods in the forms of prayers, sacrifices, rituals. And in turn for their aspirations, the daemons communicate the gods' inspirations back down to man. To inspire means to take the spirit inside you. Possession, right? Means the same thing as enthusiasm. Enthusiasmos, to take the god inside you. So we're talking about in response, the daemons will bring something of the gods down to you and possess you with them. Now, below daemons, there are orders of daemons. So we think of angels, for instance, as being this Judeo-Christian idea, but it shows up in Greek philosophy. The angels, or angelos, are right above the daemons. They're still daemons, but they're a little higher on the food chain. And below those daemons descend, think of each of these as chains coming down from each god. And below these daemons, we have heroes, cultural heroes like Hercules. These are people that in the Christian tradition, the heroes become saints. You can pray to the saints. If you're having trouble finding a house, Saint Joseph, he's the carpenter. You can pray, Saint Joseph, pray for me to find a home. The Greeks interacted with heroes in the same way. And then below the heroes, we have pure souls, which are philosophers. And then we have impure souls, which are your everyday average Joe. And then below that, we have the material realm. But all throughout this can be peopled with the dead, because the dead, in ancient thought, the dead go to Hades. In Christianity, we think of some dead people going up, some dead people going down. So when Christ entered the world, and according to the Christian model, he entered Plato's world. He entered a Greece where there was a Hades. How else could he have gone down there? In the Creed, it says after he was crucified, he descended into Hades, got the keys, released the saints, and then gave them mansions in his father's house. They're talking about Olympus, Mount Olympus, where only the gods prior to that existed. Man doesn't go to Olympus. If you wanted to go and get divine wisdom, you did what Parmenides did, and you go to the underworld and you meet the underworld goddess, the underworld god.
Persephone,
That's right.
pomegranates.
All of these are underworld divinities where the dead are stationed. Now, just because they're dead doesn't mean they're pure, doesn't mean they're philosophers, doesn't mean they tell the truth. So anytime you get involved in magical traditions, especially African diaspora traditions like Ocha, Santeria, Palo Mayombe, you're dealing with the dead. You're talking to the dead daily. But it's important that we learn what a pure picture of metaphysics looks like, so that when they feed us some statement about vengeance or about, oh, the world's not really the way you think it is, about their hang-ups, we know to test it against a true vision of metaphysics and say, well, I'm going to call your fucking bullshit. That's not how things are. You're dismissed. Can somebody else step up that has a better idea of what's going on? Now, being said,
yeah,
you said they could be angry, right? Well, anger is okay. Anger is Mars. It's a fiery energy. It's when we let anger turn us to vengeance or righteous indignation that it becomes problematic. Because pure anger, it's motivating. What's going to motivate you to get up and make a change more than anger? Certainly not grief or sadness or complacence, So anger is fine, but the moment it turns to, oh, I'm going to become the right hand of God and I'm going to show this person what's right, all you're really doing is falling back into that trap of saying no to the miracle,
Well, the jab that I did not take as a jab, but I appreciate that, is how I see it is in the times when I interacted with beings that felt like that, they were showing me a part of me that was like that.
Yeah, your epitadiates, your preparedness
exactly
to meet them.
They showed my angry. Yeah, no, it's really beautiful. They reflected that. So I just love the mirror is alive, reflecting back in the formless. I love that so much.
Yeah. And what would be your thoughts on like specifically psychedelics? Like, when you introduce entities into that or invite entities, the idea of, I don't know if possessed is the right word, but becoming possessed by something positive, some from another realm, or whether it's spirit or angel or something assisting you or inhibiting your body as well. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the same thing applies, and maybe more so in this case. I just did another interview a few days ago, and they asked me a similar question about Michael Harner and his book on shamanism, where he talks about he went to this tribe, took ayahuasca, I think, and had this terrible vision. And the shaman says, you have to tell me your vision. That what we do is we take it, and the vision that we receive, we tell everyone. And then everybody takes a step up with us. So you have to tell me so I can tell the people, the tribe. And he says, well, I saw these beings that basically told me that we're cattle, and that when I die, that they'll eat my soul. And the chief laughs, and he says, oh, those guys show up all the time. They're full of shit. Ignore those guys. They lie, So even or especially in that state, it's not the taking of the psychedelics that evokes them. There are no entities in a square of paper with LSD on it. They're everywhere all the time. What's changed is our ability to perceive them and interact with them. And I deal with some students that come to me about ghosts. There's a ghost in my house. And I'm like, do you know how many people have died on every spot on this planet? It's the fact that you can see this one, that should be a calming on you instead of saying, oh my God, there's a ghost. How do I get rid of him? Everything is ghosts. And Palo, there's this great saying that we're only alive to the degree that the dead can move through us. We're porous. The moment the dead stop moving through us is the moment we become one of the dead.
Oof.
They are everywhere all the time. And the ratio of the ones that lie to the ones that would actually like to help you are the same as at Walmart.
That's real. That's a very good perspective. I like that.
Man, I remember Yogananda, apparently someone was asking him about hell because Yogananda was saying if you brought all the prophets throughout time in one room, they would all agree. But if you bring all their followers, it would be mayhem. And so Yogananda is saying, the guy is saying, well, how come, you talk about all this amazing stuff, but where does hell fall into it? If there's truth in certain perspectives. He said, is hell real? And Yogananda smiles and looks at him and says, where do you think you are now?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And the idea is like when you identify with this body and this identity and this world as the only world, you are in hell.
Right. Plato says
that's
the same thing.
hell,
Prior to Plato, there's an underworld, there's a Hades. But Plato comes along and he allegorizes it. He says, no, we're from beyond. And when we fall, like in the Christian fall from the garden, that incarnation, we're in hell. We're at the bottom.
Yeah. It's fun down here, man. It's like the paradox of, my dad said, up there, if you will, that spirits are lining up to come down here. But in the same breath, if people knew the truth, they would cry at birth and laugh at death. So it's like the paradox of that. This is hell, but it's really fun or somehow it's really important. And two last things before we wrap this train ride up. I can hear the conductor doing his horn honking and whatnot. Bringing in my brother Taylor, who is not in the physical body anymore. I just wanted to call upon him. This quote from him came through today. Lost way down in the valley of you, your original spirit waits. Light the fire, bring it home.
Here's to Taylor.
Here's to Taylor. And a little bibliomancy.
I pulled a book as well, so
okay,
we'll do a couple.
Let's do a couple. Do you know Lewis Hyde?
Sounds familiar.
Have you heard of this book? It's called Trickster Makes This World.
No, but I can tell already I'm about to wear it.
Mischief, Myth, and Art. So this is on my syllabus. I haven't read it yet, but let's see. Let's do a little bibliomancy. I'm just going to trust it. I don't know. The point of Cage's art, then, is not to entertain nor to enchant, but to open its maker and, perhaps, its audience to the world. In one of his oft-repeated stories, Cage tells of a time when he had just left an exhibit of paintings by his friend Mark Tobey. I was standing at a corner of Madison Avenue waiting for a bus, and I happened to look at the pavement, and I noticed that the experience of looking at the pavement was the same as the experience of looking at the Tobey. Exactly the same. The aesthetic enjoyment was just as high. Cage is praising Tobey here, not criticizing him, for Tobey's work had opened its viewers' eyes. He could see and enjoy what previously might have been the city's dull and unregarded asphalt skin.
Mm.
That's fun. Okay, your turn.
All right. I pulled Sun Ra's
Let's go.
collected poems.
Let's go.
I've opened this one up randomly a number of times, and it has yet to let me down. Let's see. The rose will bloom. The rose will bloom. The broken bowl will never know the perfect self it once was shaped. And though the heavens are as far from man as all the past, they are not lifeless or insensitive as one would think. Seeing they are so distant, even the past knows all the ways of man, so the vast and timeless firmament knows, and being what is, it abides that we should search for celestial cosmo truth of myth, that we should know at last our true worth and insignificance in proximity to the endless eternal myth.
So my dad's on a bus in his, let's say, late teens, early 20s. He's coming from Connecticut to California, where he ended up getting a graveyard shift job at NBC. Fast forward, he's 32, vice president of United Artists. Pretty crazy little myth he was a part of. I may have told you this story, Edward, but he's on the bus and he's reading all sorts of crazy shit like we've been doing. And he's having revelations on the Greyhound bus. And it's just reaching a fever pitch, and he's babbling to all the people on the bus about Joyce and all these different things. Do you realize what we are and it is and da-da-da. Finally, this older woman from Chicago, apparently a black woman from Chicago, who's been on the bus, gets kind of annoyed with him. And she says, son, some of us are walking, some of us are flying, some of us are taking boats, some of us are riding buses, but we're all going to Chicago. I don't know why that reminds me of that, like the awareness of the distance that Sun Ra is talking about, and the isness and the insignificance, and Rumi's poem about like the whining of a dog for its master is the connection. So when we're asking for the gods or something, the fact that we're asking is the answer in the ask, but we're waiting for an answer, but the asking is the answer. I don't know, things like that. It's just, or the monk who, I've told this story, but I don't think it ever came out, but this will be the last thing I say, and then you guys say whatever you want, and we'll save the rest for the future. But there's a monk who, enlightened one, is walking and comes across a tortured, praying man who is, starving and trying to become enlightened through very intense measures. And he sees the enlightened one and he says, "Oh, enlightened one, when will I too become enlightened?" And the enlightened one looks down at him and he says, "You will become enlightened in 6 months' time." And the guy's like so upset. He can't handle that idea that he has to wait 6 more months. The guy goes on, comes across a Bodhi tree. Underneath, he finds a man, seemingly a simple man, has a picnic, invites the Holy One to join him. Simple conversation, nothing too heady like Pink Hearse podcast. As the enlightened man is leaving, the guy says, "Oh, enlightened one, sorry to trouble you, but I was wondering if you don't mind if you could tell me if I too might ever become enlightened." And he says, "You will become enlightened in 100 million lifetimes." And the guy breaks out in the biggest smile. He is so happy that he will get to be enlightened too. And in that moment, the sky cracks open and he becomes enlightened.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
I'm not supposed to talk anymore, according to myself 80 seconds ago. So you gotta bring us home, guys.
It's on you, Edward. What are we going to do?
Man.
Oh, he disappeared. There we go. Edward's on the road. He shorted out. That sounds like an appropriate exit, Kevin. I think what we might do after you say one more thing, I'll maybe think of a question, but we're going to maybe play a song produced by you and a friend.
Eric Smith. He goes by Cradleus is his moniker. Very talented producer.
And your band is called? Yeah, Partner in Crime. And I did some stuff over it, and so I think that's what we're about to hear. But before we go, any last thoughts? I don't know, as a father, we said so much, so maybe the emptiness is better, but any last words that you feel like saying?
Say yes to the miracle, and thank you for having me. This has been a real communion, And I hope we can do it again in the future.
Oh, we definitely will, man. In the past, we're gonna do it in the past. Would I, could I, should I? 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 Would I, could I, will. I will. Similar to it but different, puking in Latin, licking the frozen flagpole again, an inner tradition, missing the point, mission to fit in will fall short as Muggsy bogues, hornet swarm, she switches shawls in different skulls, the image carves itself. Why did you call me? What did you call me? Soon as I ribbit you salty, princesses licking the lollies, how many licks to the middle, fiddling with the upholstery board, dolphins in the Amalfi, swim in the mystery, common anomaly, swords, liquid, chords, twisted, paradox, let the instrumental talk. My dog is wiser, morals of the Oppenheimer, body-jumping philosophizer, phosphorescent, awkward shiner. Walk in silence, now you talking, tiger. The kitten strays from the straight and narrow, fuck that paw, sanitizer, kill the father, stand beside her, Dionysus is the driver, get away, mobbing minors, deeper dive, sleeper cell who speak a kind of realignment, reassignment, the beast's benevolence is ultra violet. Wanna play God like MK Ultra, ultimate soldier, my djembe pulses with the emotions of let's say Baba Yaga. Let's play no eggshell, wanna step XO in the X-ray, ghost blow, kiss to the left brain, lab coat, boy can't explain. Try to, haiku, blind you, see more, I do, wait, I do, get it like EYEDEW, in the morning of why who, has no name, wave goodbye to, training wheels, losing marbles by the dozen, fingers are long toes, and I'm climbing up the trunk again, out of the hearse, trunk again, dead sober, drunk again. Wanna play God like MK Ultra, ultimate soldier, my djembe pulses with the emotions of let's say Baba Yaga. Let's play no eggshell, wanna step XO when the X-ray ghost blow, kisses to the left brain, lab boy, explain. I'll try to, haiku, blind you, see more, I do. How is he risen if he doesn't let it all go? Like this flow that I know will fall on deaf ears. Listen. It's just a mere glitching again.